Okay, today we have Crystal Vega. She is the Director of Health, Welfare, and Leave Strategy outside of the US at Bristol Myers Squibb. I'm particularly excited about talking to you today. You and I go way back from our GSK days. So before we start, can you tell us a little bit about yourself and your background and your career? Anything you want to share?
So first, thanks for having me. And as you mentioned, yes, I'm the Director of Health, Welfare, and Leave Strategy ex-US at Bristol Myers Squibb, or BMS. I've been in the role now for 3 years, and I've been working in the benefits space now, actually 10 years.
That's awesome.
And my journey in benefits started working with you. So, and I'm sure that that's something that we'll get into later on. But currently, I'm responsible for the strategy and governance of benefits and leaves outside of the US. So, the Bristol Myers Squibb has a presence in about 42 countries. So, I manage all of them except US and Puerto Rico.
Very nice. So you're actually the first person that I'm interviewing that in the similar space. Well, I'm unfamiliar with leave strategy, but I've been doing international benefits my entire career now. Um, so I don't want to get too niche, but I do want to be able to talk the idea here is that someone who's maybe unfamiliar with our space could get an idea of what it's like in your world or our world, what a typical day looks like for you. So I'll try not to get too niche, but I am very curious about, as you said, you and I have been working together for a while, but what, like if we talk about your career path, what inspired you to pursue a career in benefits?
It's funny because I feel like I fell into benefits and
I
not
feel like everyone
necessarily was
does.
like, yeah, it wasn't something that I was necessarily interested in to begin with. So I had a job at GSK and I was an outsourced employee, but
Hmm.
at GSK, and I was working in customer service at the time. And I was also pursuing my bachelor's degree in business administration. And I was getting close to graduation, and I didn't feel that like the roles that I'd had up to that point were really related to business administration. And so I was starting to update my resume and update my LinkedIn profile and trying to network as much as possible to see like what other opportunities were available. Trying to take advantage of the fact that I was already working at GSK, right? And that there
Hmm.
are roles that pertain to my or related to my degree there. And so, interestingly enough, you reached out to me and you said that you'd seen my profile and you were actually looking to hire an intern to work on a preventive healthcare project on the finance team. And that's kind of how things got started. And I remember when you and I did sit down to interview and you started talking to me about the project, I remember sitting there and thinking, like, I have no idea what any of this means or what he's talking to me about, but it's financing and it's in HR. And this seems like it's a better career path than what I'm currently doing, right? So despite me not knowing what you were talking to me about, I decided to take the risk and apply for the role. And so when I did, you gave me the position, and so I'm still very grateful to you for that. Um, and then from there, I think just things started to like develop very quickly. I feel
Hmm.
by the time I joined the project, we were maybe 2 or 3 years from it coming to an end anyway. And so you started to, I think your role started to expand, and because your role started to expand, my roles and responsibilities started to expand as well. And so I was touching not just um, the invoicing and budgeting pieces of this preventive healthcare project that we were working on, but then now I was getting pulled into other areas as well and learning more of benefits across the company. And so that area started to interest me, I think, more than it being about employee benefits, but because it was international in scope. And so I started to then connect with people all across the company. And like that was very exciting for me. And so I came to love benefits when I was in that role. And then I've stayed ever since. So,
All right. That's so I don't want to do this all episode, but you always give me too much credit. And I think no, I think it's important too. So there's two things. One is there's a reason why you're still very successful and why you're doing fantastic at BMS now. But also, I think it's important too for people who are maybe interested in learning how do you navigate. You weren't switching careers because it was new,
Mhm.
but you say I came to you and asked, but what happened was is that you reached out to me on LinkedIn. You didn't ask me about a role, but you
Yeah.
set up your page. Um, Everything was ready to go, right? And I always screw up the quote, but one of my favorite quotes is luck is when opportunity meets preparation.
Mhm.
You were prepared. There happened to be an opportunity,
Yeah.
and you and I kind of knew each other in passing from working in the same building, but I had no idea that you were at the time. Another thing that I respect about you is you were putting yourself through school while working full time at GSK. But I had no idea you were going for a business degree. And so like it aligned, but it was because of the initiative you took.
Yeah.
And again, didn't give you the position, you earned it. And another thing that you said was your role didn't expand because my role was expanding. It was a combination of all of those things, right? Like again, preparation and opportunity. There was an opportunity there, but you didn't get it. Just think about how many interns we had at the
No.
time.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Your role developed into a role, yes, because of timing, but also because of you. So that we won't do this all interview, but I want to be clear because I think that that's an important piece, right? That there
Mhm.
is a lot of timing and luck, but it's about how you take advantage of it and the preparation that you put into it and your approach. I mean, you and I always got along, I think, because we're both very self-deprecating, but
Yeah.
you also are like you work your ass off. You're an extremely hard worker, and that always comes through. And your approach with things is has always been awesome. So
Yeah.
um, so I'll stop. We'll stop doing that, and I'll turn it back over to you.
Which is this is very much what our conversations are like all the
Always, yeah, I always have to keep propping
time.
you up. Um, but so okay, so yes, I think P for P. Maybe I've never talked, but partnership for prevention. Do you want to talk about it from your perspective? Because I think that that's probably that's one of the coolest things. Like, yes, international benefits, I think, is a super interesting world, especially because of the things that you talked about, right? Like you're I I don't ever mean to denigrate what goes into single country management, but I think it's
Mhm.
real like the one of the things that I like about international benefits is the fact that you can't possibly be an expert
And
in 150 countries, right? So you're always learning something new. There's always new approaches to different things. You can learn something in one country that won't fit perfectly in another, but the approach that you have there might be similar to another. It's a
laws are
really cool
always
space that you're,
changing.
what'd you
Yeah.
say?
Laws are always changing.
Always changing. The regulatory environment's always
Yeah.
changing.
Yeah.
But do you want to touch a little bit more about P for P and share
Yes.
your experience there?
Yes, yes. So the preventive healthcare project that we worked on was called Partnership for Prevention, or P for short. And essentially, you can probably talk better about how it was formed or why it was formed. But what we were looking to do was obviously in the US, we have a pretty good healthcare system. We have access to preventive healthcare services, and that's kind of the norm, but that's not necessarily the norm outside of the US, right? And so when we look at what's driving medical costs, a lot of it can be prevented if employees just are able to detect diseases early on, right? So things like making sure that you're getting vaccinated, doing cancer screenings, checking your cardiovascular health, right?
Hmm.
Like that can help prevent really high medical claims later on, right? And so the aim of the project was to ensure that all GSK employees had access to a core group of preventive healthcare services. I think in total there were probably about like 40 or so services
Something, yep.
that we were looking to provide across the globe. And that changed, right, depending on whether there was a particular disease that was common in a given market. But for the most part, there were about 40 services that we were providing to all of the employees. And we were doing so either through the medical plan or we were setting up like one-off contracts to ensure that employees had access to these services regardless of where they were located. Um, and so, yeah, I don't know if you want to give a little bit more background as to how it started, because I think you know that better. You were part of the group that got it off its feet. But do you want to do
No,
that
no,
first?
no.
And then I can
The
talk
only
about,
thing, the only
yeah.
thing I would say is for people who are listening that potentially know the global benefit space, I would say that this was the precursor to global minimum standards. So Crystal's talking about like how we launched this program. We had bespoke programs set up in every single country, and then in some countries we had multiple bespoke programs. It wasn't necessarily sustainable, but I look at it as the precursor to global minimum standards because at the time no one was doing anything like this. And it was a super rewarding project for the reasons that Crystal said. Like in addition to the savings that this brought, it meant a lot at an employee level.
Yeah.
So it was a super, super cool project. But yeah,
That's very rewarding, absolutely. And then in terms of like my role or our roles, I would say, so I think you
no,
got all of the
you
preliminary, well,
talk about your role.
like you got all of the preliminary like projections in place for the program, like what this potentially was going to cost GSK, like the initial upfront investment and what it was going to cost the market thereafter, because the program was able to get central funding after a pilot was completed in 4 markets, if I
Hmm.
remember correctly. So the program was paying for the first 2 years of P4P after its launch in a given market, and then we would help the market sort of understand the costs involved with keeping the program up and running, and then we sort of transferred it locally, right? So you did the original projections, and that was you were responsible for the financial aspect of the project. I was an intern on your team, and so I was responsible then for processing all of the invoices that were coming in as part of the program. In addition to the invoices, we were also getting data, right? Because I think throughout the entire time, we were still trying to prove that this is the right thing to do. And
Hmm.
we had the data to back it up, right? So making sure that the data made sense, that we weren't being double charged for services, or that, there wasn't an individual who was receiving services that they shouldn't have been, right? Like a male receiving uh, what is it, a pregnancy care, right?
Sure, sure.
And so
That was like
um,
our fraud and abuse.
yes,
Yeah,
yes,
yeah, yeah.
yes. And so it was that piece, and then that kind of expanded into helping run projections for the markets, once we were getting close to that 2-year mark, to help them understand the costs involved. And then I eventually took over some of the budgeting for the program, not just for the finance piece, but then also more broadly than that, right? Like I was looking at all of the items that were coming into our cost center and
Hmm.
provide projections for that as well. So
Yeah. Okay. So if we like switching gears and moving on from that. So I do think, again, super rewarding program. I think for me at least, I won't speak for you, but that I learned a ton about that. Like you and I, we got to travel to the markets. We got to go speak about this program at a lot of places. And in doing so, you learn a lot from the people that you're supporting and the people that you're speaking to about it. Um, so if we switch gears to present day, like what would you say? I am curious about a typical day, right? But also, what would you say that you learned in that space that you apply now, or since this wasn't necessarily, like you said, you fell into benefits. Again, I do feel like everyone does, but um, as you grew in that role and you took on more and more, I assume, and your kind of curiosity or love for the international benefit space grew, and now your role has expanded significantly from there. So, what would you say like the biggest takeaways from that program are that you apply today?
so biggest takeaways, I think for me is number one thing is like you don't need to know everything.
Yeah,
um,
that's true.
so I think when I think about when I started in the benefit space, I think it was very much like there was there was a standard sort of procedure on how you do things, right? Like everything was very straightforward, everything made sense, it was black and white. Whereas now the role that I'm in, it's all gray, all shades of gray. And one thing that works here doesn't necessarily work there. And so um, you have to balance a lot of different things in the role that I'm currently in, right? Like you have to understand what's your HR or people strategy, what is your benefits strategy, where are we financially, what's going on in the market, what's the regulatory environment like, right? What do employee contracts look like in this market? um, are there any sort of behaviors that we're looking to change? So there's just so many different elements that you need to take into consideration when you do a global benefits role. And so I think accepting the fact that you don't know everything, but you can still perform the role, I think was number one for me. That is something that I think I've struggled with the most, because I came from a role that was very black and white. And um, having to be strategic and think differently about a problem. And again, that problem may not be the solution everywhere. Like that, I think is sometimes the toughest pill to swallow. And that has probably been the toughest challenge for me. But I think that is the biggest takeaway. Um,
Which I think is good advice across any role.
yeah.
If you're honest and you're sincere about, if you're honest about what you know and what you don't know,
Mhm.
I think that's a recipe for success, I think.
Yeah, and then also like leaning on building relationships and knowing when and how to lean on those relationships, right? Like I think oftentimes like until a problem comes up, then you don't think about like, oh, well, who could potentially help me in this situation, right? Like I
Hmm.
think there's a lot of pre-work that needs to happen in terms of like understanding who the people are that you work with
Hmm.
and building up those relationships so that they're already in a good place before you do need to come with them on a potential,
Yes.
right? Because it makes
Yeah.
everything much easier going forward, right?
Yep.
So I think those are the two bigger pieces that I've taken away from like all of the change that I've been through in my career so far. Um, I think that was that answers part of your question.
Yeah, yeah.
The other part was what does a typical day look like for me? And I think what I love and hate about a benefits role is that the days never look the same. Um, Even like hour by hour they change, and so um, in a ton of meetings, I'll say that, but it's always about, there's always a ton of things going on in terms of like very specific market issues and then very big macro issues. So at BMS, like I'm in the process of implementing an employee benefits captive. So that takes up a lot of my time. I've also recently taken over leads. And that's sort of a structure that we're still trying to build up, right? Like I think the benefits team and structure that we have in place is very mature. We don't necessarily have that on the lead side. And so um, there's still a lot of things that I'm taking and doing that perhaps once we have a bigger team set up, we'll find the right roles and or we'll find the right responsibilities for the different roles. But there's still a lot that I'm carrying, and so I may have to look at a military leave request in Israel, and then I might have to look at a parental leave request in Ireland, and obviously those are very different. The laws around that are very different. So understanding what has been our BMS practice, what the law states that we should be following, and whether I need to be making changes to the procedural document or the notes that employees are seeing, right? So there's a lot of work that goes there.
Hmm.
Um, and then from a benefits perspective, there is, in addition to the captive piece, right, a lot of our policies are renewing. So making sure that we're looking at the plans, making sure that they're still competitive. We receive a lot of feedback from our employees. They're very vocal. So ensuring that we're taking their feedback, anything that we're hearing from HR, any financial concerns that we're getting from the markets, and just making sure that we're constantly looking at how we make sure that we're providing the right benefits to our employees at the right cost for the company. And so that's also a lot of what I'm doing today. So it differs
Yeah, no, I get
because
it.
there's always a different request coming from a different market, and so it's never the same, never a dull moment at all.
I agree with that. Okay. So moving to the namesake of this series is If I Knew Then. So think of this as like advice for your younger self. If I knew then what I know now, would I do things differently? This could be for you as an individual. This could be hindsight advice to share with people potentially looking to follow in your footsteps or anyone looking to switch careers, just general advice. What would you what would you share with the benefit of your experience now in hindsight?
I think the 2 points that I mentioned earlier about
Not
research
needing to.
everything and
Mhm.
and and building up your network are key. I think for me and like the type of person that I am, I'm very quiet, shy, and reserved, right? And so very introverted. Even this is like super uncomfortable for me. But
You're an extroverted introvert, I would say.
you think so. um, but I think speaking up is probably one of those things that I would tell my younger self. And I'd like to think that I have always done that, but I think when you combine my type of personality with not feeling very confident when you don't always know the answer to something, right? When you combine those two things, I think it can often lead to like one, like, oh, maybe I should keep quiet because I don't know. Or you don't want to come across as lacking knowledge or um, saying the wrong thing, right? Or yeah, so I think that is often a challenge that I faced when I was younger. I think I got better at it because I am also like, while I am shy and soft spoken, I think I'm also very direct. And so when I don't know something, I do just say like, I don't know this. Who can I
Hmm.
rely on, or who can I touch base with to get a better understanding of this topic so that I can speak with more knowledge. Or sometimes I just kind of put my foot in my mouth and just say what I think it is, and if it's wrong, it's wrong. But like I said it,
I know
and
that.
then and I don't mean that in a bad way, right? Like I mean in terms of like sometimes I think I'm offering a good solution because I'm offering a solution with the best of my knowledge that I have
Hmm.
currently, right? And so sometimes that's wrong, and people will tell me, well, actually, you don't have the full picture. So here's the full picture, right? I don't think you get to those places of understanding unless you sometimes just speak up
Yeah,
and
unless you're honest.
you
I
feel
agree
like,
with you.
yeah,
Yeah, I
um,
completely agree. Being direct is my preferred way forward. People who work with me know that.
yeah. So I think that's a very big one. And then I think also being open minded. I I think I struggled a bit because I was very nervous about where I was gonna go, where my career was gonna go. I never thought I'd be working in the benefit space or that I'd be in the role that I am in today. I always was very like small minded in terms of like my like I don't know. I didn't see myself growing into a director role, right? Just because that wasn't the example of jobs that I had growing up around me, right? Like everything was very much blue collar, and so um, I think being open to new opportunities and taking risks, preparing yourself, right? Like that's something we talked about earlier as well. Like being prepared, but then also not being afraid of taking advantage of an opportunity and knowing how to weigh the pros and cons of those opportunities so that you don't sell yourself short or you don't learn something new because you're afraid.
Yeah. Thank you for sharing that. I think that's going to be really helpful for people. But I totally agree with you. I think the biggest thing is leveraging fear and discomfort and using it for you because that's where you grow, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
But I also agree with you. Like we're both Philly born and raised. It's a very blue collar city. But
Yes.
it comes through like I feel like, and you and I have talked about this before, I think it's helped us in our
Yeah.
career. That kind of being direct, that hardworking, no matter what role you're in, that this is, this is the way. Go ahead.
Actually, and you know what? Something else, and I think this might be a Philly thing too, but not taking things personally.
Oh yes. Yeah, yeah.
That is,
I still have to remind myself.
yeah. Or,
I've gotten better.
yeah, like sometimes, like when a project doesn't work out or something that you really put all your blood, sweat, and tears in doesn't bear the fruit that you thought it would, I
Yeah.
think understanding that that's not necessarily a representation of your hard work and who you are as a person, right? Like sometimes things fail
Yep.
for a
And
number
that's
of
okay.
reasons, right?
Yeah.
And that is okay. Like being able to separate who you are as a person from the work that you're doing, I think is often important because there are going to be times where like you prepare things and you want this project to um, to get started and you might get a no. And then
Yeah.
like, oh, I did all of this pre-work, maybe I didn't do enough or whatever it is, right? Like, or you work on something and it may not be well received. And always be open to feedback, right? Like there are things that yes, you can improve, but also understanding that sometimes you did do all of the right things. It just maybe wasn't the right time or there wasn't enough money for it or whatever it may be, right? So it's not always a
Absolutely.
reflection of the work that you do and who you are.
Yep. As long as you learn from it, I
Yeah.
totally agree.
Yeah.
There's no failure as long as you're learning. Um, okay. So for the sake of time, I will thank you very much for this conversation. Um, I really appreciate you coming on. I'm very happy for your success. It's awesome watching you continue to grow, and um, I'm thrilled for you. Is one last thing. Um, what's next for you? What are future goals? Like you as an individual?
Um, Professionally, you mean like what my
Yeah, whatever you want to share. Yeah. Like what are you thinking about next?
so I feel like the role that I am in currently, because it changes so much, it feels like you never really fully learn it, right? Like there's always something new to learn. So I think I have to get to a point where I feel like comfortable in that, like, okay, even though there are always things that are changing, I feel like I've maxed out
Okay.
my learning opportunities here. So I think getting to that point, and I don't think I'm there quite yet. But I've always been interested in um, the whole of what Total Rewards has to offer, right? So like benefits is very niche and specific,
Hmm.
and so I think for me professionally, I would like to start to explore some of the other areas of Total Rewards, right? Like mobility or compensation and so.
Nice.
So learn all of those areas so that I can be a well-rounded Total Rewards expert.
I like that.
But I love the space, so like I really do think I do see myself staying within the benefit space long term, because I do just find it very interesting, and I think, like I said, it's always changing, and there's always so much room to be innovative and creative. So as long as that it's offering me that, then I think I'd stay here.
Love it. All right. Thank you very much. I really appreciate the time today, Crystal.
Thank you so much for having me.
No problem. Talk to you later.
Bye.
Bye bye.